Chapter 2: Why This Matters Now. I'm a firm believer that we all have incredible superpowers that are waiting to be awakened. I'm not talking about the ability to fly, create ironclad armor, or shoot lasers from your eyes, but real-life practical abilities like flying through books, ironclad memory, laser focus, boundless creativity, clear thinking, mindfulness, superior mental attitude, and more. We are all superheroes in one way or another. Just as every superhero has powers, so do they have an arch nemesis. Enter the super villain. Think the Joker to Batman, Lex Luthor to Superman. The villains we face may not look the same as they do in the movies, but they're still the bad guys, the ones you, as the superhero, need to vanquish and hold at bay. Modern-day supervillains get in our way and make our life harder, keeping us from our potential. They could hold us back and rob us from our productivity, prosperity, positivity, and peace of mind. And it's up to us to recognize and defeat them. If you've ever read a comic book or watched a superhero movie, you know that supervillains are often born of unlikely places. Take Harvey Dent, also known as Two-Face, for example. He starts out with the greatest of intentions. He's a prosecutor helping to uphold the law and put the bad guys in jail, and he's an ally of Batman. But through an act of revenge, Dent's face is scarred and he turns angry, bitter, and vengeful. He becomes what he has spent his life fighting, a duplicitous criminal who gambles with his victims' futures. The good in him becomes twisted and used for sinister ends. In the same way, the four supervillains of learning started out innocent. They are being fed by some of the greatest advancements that humankind has made in the last 100 years. They were given rise by technology. To be clear, technology is a vital part of progress and being limitless. It allows us to do everything from connecting to learning, making our lives that much more convenient. But it is possible that we consume digital technology at a rate that even its creators would find extreme. Much of the technology available to us today is so new that we don't know the level at which we need to control our interaction with it. Through our educational platform, Kwik, we have students in 195 countries and have generated tens of millions of podcast downloads. Our community has expressed a growing concern about their over-reliance on technology, and they have come to us to upgrade their brains to find relief from these four horsemen of our age: digital deluge, digital distraction, digital dementia, and digital deduction. It's important to note that overload, distraction, forgetfulness, and default thinking have been around for ages. While technology doesn't cause these conditions, it has a potential to amplify them. The benefits of the digital age are plentiful, but let's take a look how the advances in technology that help you can possibly also hinder you. Digital deluge. Do you have too much to process but not enough time? We're privileged to live in a world with so much unfeathered access to information. In this age of connectivity, ignorance is a choice. Compared to the 15th century, we now consume as much data in a single day as the average person from the 1400s would have absorbed in an entire lifetime. Not so long ago, information moved glacially through word of mouth, or a newspaper, or a posted bulletin in town square. Now, we have so much access to information that it's taking a toll on our time and our quality of life. The average person consumes 3 times as much information as we did in the 1960s. A 2015 report indicated that respondents spent 8 hours a day consuming media. In an NPR interview, New York Times tech reporter Matt Richtel said that after 20 years of glorifying technology as if all of it were good, quote, I think science is beginning to embrace the idea that some technology is Twinkies and some technology is Brussels sprouts. If we consume too much technology, just like we consume too much food, it could have ill effects, end quote. In a University of California, San Francisco study on the effect of downtime, researchers gave rats a new experience and measured their brain waves during and after the activity. Under most circumstances, a new experience will express new neural activity and new neurons in the brain. That is, if the rat is allowed to have downtime. With downtime, the neurons made their way from the gateway of memory to the rest of the brain, where long-term memory is stored. The rats were able to record memories of their experiences, which is the basis for learning. Doesn't that make you wonder what happens if you don't have downtime? There is a growing body of evidence that suggests that if we never let our mind wander or be bored for a moment, we pay a price. Poor memory, mental fog, and fatigue. As far back as the mid-1990s, where digital deluge was a fraction of the concern it is now, research was beginning to show that there were real health risks involved with navigating through an always-on world. A Reuters study, ominously titled Dying for Information, showed that 2 out of 3 respondents associated information overload with tension with colleagues and loss of job satisfaction. 42% attributed ill health to this stress. 61% said that they have to cancel social activities as a result of information overload, and 60% that they are frequently too tired for leisure activities. The study goes on to add, faced with an onslaught of information and information channels, they have become unable to develop simple routines for managing information. What's more, we also have to contend with the fact that the half-life of information has decreased. The half-life of information is the amount of time that passes before that information is replaced by newer or more accurate information. You can study to your heart's content. The information you process now will be outdated sooner than you think. Facts, written in articles, books, and documentaries, are based on strong evidence and accepted as truth, but then they are completely reversed when a new study comes out. I don't need to tell you how completely inundated each of us is with digital details. Even when we try to go off the grid, digital information somehow finds us. While I'm writing this, I've shut down all my devices, but I need to have access to the internet for research purposes, and a handful of random notifications and updates still popped up on my computer. Yes, I know I could turn these off as well, but you get my point. In Chapter 12, Study, and Chapter 14, Speed Reading, you will discover practical ways to catch up, keep up, and get ahead of the digital deluge of information you must process every day. Quick start. Take a moment and schedule 30 minutes of white space in your calendar for this week. This is time to be spent away from technology, time dedicated to clear your mind, relax, and be creative. Digital distraction. Before mobile devices, we would say BRB, be right back, all the time when we're online. We don't say it anymore. We no longer leave. We live here now. Because of our always-on, ever-connected devices, we're struggling to find connection when we're with friends and family, and we're struggling to stay focused at work. Most of us deal with some kind of work-life situation where we don't feel comfortable foregoing digital connection for large swaths of time every day. So we stay on the grid out of the fear that if we were unreachable, we would lose out. The trouble is we're wired to enjoy it. Each successive hit of dopamine we get from the likes we share on social media or from the texts we get from loved ones or friends only reinforces our behavior. But those rewards are changing our brains. Instead of relaxing into the downtime that we might experience when waiting in line, waiting for a bus or an appointment, etc., we pull out our phones and train our distraction muscles. What happens when this is our constant way of being, when every loose moment is filled with shiny stimulus? Staying connected may make us feel more secure, but it doesn't necessarily make us happier. Ryan Dwyer, M.A., of the University of British Columbia led a study that showed how our digital habits are affecting our relationships. In one experiment, more than 300 adults and university students were asked to keep their phones on the table, easily accessible, while others were asked to put them on silent and keep them in a container on the table during a meal. Afterwards, participants were asked to respond to a questionnaire that asked them about their feelings of connectiveness, enjoyment, distraction, and boredom. The survey also asked them to detail the amount of time they spent on their phone during the meal. Those whose phones were accessible used them more often, and they described themselves as feeling more distracted. They also enjoyed the dinner less than the diners who didn't have access to their phones. Modern technology may be wonderful, but it can easily sidetrack us and take away from the special moments we have with friends and family in person, Dwyer says of the study. Just as few of us have learned how to learn, not many know how to process and filter the massive amount of information we are constantly seeing. We just multitask to get all of it in, and this doesn't serve us well. Asking the brain to shift attention from one activity to another causes the prefrontal cortex and striatum to burn up oxygenated glucose, the same fuel they need to stay on task, notes neuroscientist Daniel J. Levitin in his book, The Organized Mind, Thinking Straight in the Age of Information Overload. And the kind of rapid, continual shifting we do with multitasking causes the brain to burn through fuel so quickly that we feel exhausted and disoriented after even a short time. We've literally depleted the nutrients in our brain. This leads to compromises in both cognitive and physical performance. From app notifications to media alerts, it's not just adults who deal with this. With the availability of technology and social pressure to be online and active on social media, children and teenagers experience the constant distraction too. In Chapter 11, Focus, you will discover the keys to sustained concentration and focus development to learn and get things done. Quick start. Go to the notification settings of your phone and turn off all unnecessary and distracting pings and dings. Do this now. Digital dementia. When is the last time you had to remember someone's phone number? I'm dating myself here, but I'm part of a generation that when you wanted to call your friend down the block, you needed to know their number. Can you still remember some of your best friend's numbers from childhood? What about the number of the person you talk or text every day? You no longer have to because your mobile remembers it for you. This is not to say anyone wants to or should memorize 200 phone numbers, but we've all but lost the ability to remember a new one, or a conversation we just had, the name of a new potential client, or something important we need to do. Neuroscientist Manfred Spitzer uses the term digital dementia to describe how overuse of digital technology results in the breakdown of cognitive abilities. He argues that short-term memory pathways will start to deteriorate from underuse if we overuse technology. It's the same with GPS. Move to a new city and see how quickly you become reliant on GPS to tell you how to get around. Then notice how long it takes you to map new roads in your mind, probably much longer than when you were younger, but not because your brain isn't working as well. With tools like GPS, we don't give our minds the chance to work. We rely on technology to do the memorization for us. This reliance may be hurting our long-term memory. Maria Wimber of the University of Birmingham told the BBC that the trend of looking up information prevents the buildup of long-term memories. In a study that examined the memory habits of 6,000 adults in the UK, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg, Wimber and her team found that more than a third of the respondents turned to their computer first to retrieve information. The UK came in the highest. More than half of the participants searched online first without trying to come up with the answers themselves. Why is this a big deal? Because such instant information can be easily and immediately forgotten. Our brain appears to strengthen a memory each time we recall it, and at the same time forget irrelevant memories that are distracting us, said Dr. Wimber. Forcing yourself to recall information instead of relying on an outside source to supply it for you is a way of creating and strengthening a permanent memory. When you contrast that with the reality that most of us have a habit of constantly looking up information, maybe even the same information, without bothering to try to remember it, it seems we're doing ourselves harm. Is relying on technology always bad? Many researchers disagree. The argument goes that by outsourcing some menial tasks like memorizing phone numbers or doing basic math or getting directions to a restaurant we visited before, we're saving brain space for something that matters more to us. There's research that says our brains are more like a muscle rather than a hard drive that fills up, that the more you use it, the stronger it gets and the more it could store. The question is, are we making those choices consciously, or are we acting out of unconscious habit? Too often, we outsource our brains to our smart devices, and our smart devices are making us, well, a little bit stupid. Our brains are the ultimate adaptation machines, capable of seemingly endless levels of evolution, and yet we often forget to give it the exercise it needs. Just as there is a physical price to always relying on the technology of the elevator instead of taking the stairs, so is there a price for lazy mental muscles. Use it or lose it. In Chapter 13, Memory, I will show you simple tools and techniques to remember anything from names and speeches to languages faster and easier. Quick start. Take a minute to exercise your memory. Memorize the phone number of someone you communicate with regularly. Digital deduction. In a digital-first world, where millennials obtain all their answers to problems at the click of a mouse or a swipe of a finger, the reliance on technology to solve every question confuses people's perception of their own knowledge and intelligence. And that reliance may well lead to overconfidence and poor decision-making, says Roni Zarum, founder of the video collaboration platform Neuro. The ubiquity of information about everything also means that there's a ubiquity of opinion about everything. If you want to know how to feel about a hot-button issue, you can just go online and collate the opinions of others. If you want to know the implications of an event or a trend, a quick online search will provide endless amounts of analysis. The upshot is that deduction, an amalgam of critical thinking, problem-solving, and creativity that is an essential skill for being limitless, is being automated. There's a certain amount of value to this, of course. Before the internet, we were limited in our access to the opinions of others. In an ideal world, being able to get as many perspectives on a topic as possible would be enormously valuable in helping us form our own opinions. Unfortunately, that's rarely how it plays out in the real world. Instead, we tend to identify a handful of sources with which we align and then give those sources extreme influence over our thinking and decision making. In the process, the muscles we use to think critically and reason effectively are atrophying. We're letting technology do the deduction for us. And if technology is forming our deductions, then we are also ceding much of our problem-solving ability, something so important and something we will discuss at length later in this book. Psychologist Jim Taylor defines thinking as the capacity to reflect, reason, and draw conclusions based on our experiences, knowledge, and insights. It's what makes us human and has enabled us to communicate, create, build, advance, and become civilized. He then goes on to caution that there is a growing body of research that technology can be both beneficial and harmful to different ways in which children think. Patricia Marks Greenfield, Distinguished Professor of Psychology at UCLA, has been looking at this issue for more than a decade. In discussing the impact on education, she wrote, "What is the effect on learning if college students use their laptops to access the internet during a classroom lecture?" This was tested in a communication studies class where students were generally encouraged to use their laptops during lectures in order to explore lecture topics in greater detail on the internet and in library databases. Half of the students were allowed to keep their laptops open, while the other half, randomly assigned, had to close their laptops. Students in the closed laptop condition recalled significantly more material in a surprise quiz after class than did the students in the open laptop condition. Because they were engaging their minds in the lecture rather than looking for what the internet already thought about the subject, they were much more responsive when it was time to reason for themselves. Greenfield analyzed another study that showed that college students who watched a news program without the crawl at the bottom of the screen remembered significantly more of what the anchors were discussing. Playwright Richard Foreman fears that this reliance on the internet to do much of our thinking is changing our very selves. "I come from a tradition of Western culture in which the ideal, my ideal, was the complex, dense, and cathedral-like structures of the highly educated and articulate personality, a man or woman who carried inside themselves a personality constructed and unique version of the entire heritage of the West. But today I see within us, myself included, the replacement of complex inner density with a new kind of self-evolving under the pressure of information overload and the technology of the instantly available." Do you remember what it was like when you were approaching your teens and you first started formulating thoughts and opinions independent of your parents? My guess is that this experience was extremely liberating for you, and that it might have been the first time in your life when you truly felt like your own person. What had happened to you, of course, was that your critical faculties had become refined enough to allow you to regularly employ reason to navigate through life. Why then would you want to turn this liberating skill over to a device? Think about it. How do you feel when someone tries to impose their thinking on you? If a family member, friend, or colleague came to you and said, "Don't think about this, here's your opinion," you try to get away from that person as soon as you possibly could. Yet, when we immediately reach for the internet to provide us with information, we're essentially inviting the same thing. In Chapter 15, I will provide you with a powerful set of tools that will allow you to supercharge your thinking and expand your perspective on any topic or problem. While these four horsemen are the ones we need to contend with most vociferously, there's another digital danger that is worthy of our attention: digital depression, a result of the comparison culture that emerges when we let the highlight reels of the social media feeds and others cause us to perceive ourselves as less than. Now, I enjoy social media. I love staying connected with our community of students and podcast listeners and staying updated with the everyday lives of my family and friends. I appreciate it so much as not only a source of entertainment, but also education and empowerment. But I only recommend using it consciously, not mindlessly out of habit, and in a harmonious way so it doesn't hijack your productivity and peace of mind. In the upcoming Part 2, Limitless Mindset, I share ideas to mitigate these feelings of not being enough, as well as fears of looking bad or missing out. Those are the same limits that stand in the way of personal growth and learning. In Part 3, Limitless Motivation, I will show you how to add, break, or change these habits. Quick start. Think about a decision you need to make and schedule some time to work on that decision without the use of any digital devices. Keeping the villains at bay. In the hero's journey, the heroes need villains just as much as villains need heroes. The challenges from trials and rivals make us grow and become better. The power and strength of the villain determines the necessary power and strength of the hero. If the villain was weak, there would be nothing to vanquish and no need for the hero to rise to greatness. In my podcast interview with Simon Sinek, author of The Infinite Game, Simon refers to our worthy rivals, those who help point out the personal weaknesses we need to address. This is where your opportunity lies. As I mentioned, I love the light side of technology, how it could connect us, educate us, and empower us, make our lives easier. What we've just described are a few drawbacks of technology, which is an inherent part of all the good things that it brings into our lives. Like fire, technology has changed the course of human history. However, fire can cook your food or burn your home down. It's all in how you use it. Like any tool, technology itself isn't good or bad, but we must consciously control how it's used. If we don't, then who becomes the tool? It's up to you to choose how you engage. Quick start. Which of the 4 digital supervillains do you believe are currently most disrupting your performance, productivity, and peace of mind? Take a moment and write the name of this villain down in your notepad. Conscious awareness is the first part to solving a problem.
Okay, so now we're at the supervillains. This is where the story starts to get interesting.
Yeah, where you accepted the call to adventure, and now you have to face
The 4
these.
horsemen, which is such a great way to provide a conceptual framework for something I think we all feel. We feel the impacts daily of, these different sort of challenges with our digital technology, but we don't have words to describe it. So
Right.
that's super, super helpful. I just want to check, we talk about them as villains, but you also talk about the power of them. So you're not anti-technology.
No, I'm actually very pro-technology. I'm so excited where the world is going. There's so much abundance with as advances in technology goes to be able to educate people, to empower them, to allow us to be connected. What we're highlighting here are some of the potential drawbacks. And so you could be better prepared. And when I'm talking about the 4 horsemen, I'm not saying there's going to be an apocalypse to intelligence or anything like that. If anything, we have the capability to be more intelligent and more empowered. What I'm challenged with is that I think everybody could relate to this, that they're listening, that we're always on all the time. And our brains are never shutting off, and it's not getting that downtime. And it's also not getting the exercise it would normally get if we're relying on technology to remember things for us, to do the thinking for us, what makes us human. And a lot of jobs right now, they're being outsourced to automation, artificial intelligence. to machines. And what makes us human is our ability to be creative, to use our imagination, to use our critical thinking. And that's why this book is so timely and also timeless, because these super villains, quote unquote, are just going to get stronger in power, meaning there's going to be more overload. You think there's a lot of deluge now, it's just going to grow. The amount of information is doubling at dizzying speeds. More pings and dings and rings in terms of distraction. More dependence on third-party technology and doing the thinking for us. So it's about responsibility. It's about using it consciously.
It's interesting because, even though they seem like supervillains, maybe in this context, it's a huge part of it is how we show up in our relationship with it.
Yeah.
And the choices we make in relationship with it, whether we want to use those technologies to free up those parts of our brains, like for higher thinking, or whether we just get trapped in a distraction cycle.
It's exactly how it's employed. Another way of looking at it is they're not necessarily supervillains, but they could be superpowers. Technology is a superpower, but it's the intention behind how it's being used. And so someone just having superpowers doesn't make you a superhero. You have to use those powers for good, because somebody who has a lot of superpowers could use it for not so good as well.
And you talk about in this chapter the power of having the awareness, like just becoming aware that, that these different challenges will show up in our day-to-day lives. For someone who is just beginning to work with this framework, what's a helpful way to start to notice when they're being subjected to digital deluge or distraction or deduction or dementia? How can we start to really notice moment to moment?
I think awareness is the starting point for all change. Even when we look at our phone, you could look at the settings in terms of how much screen time you're spending actually engaged with your technology. And I think a lot of people will be very surprised. And again, I'm all for technology to be able to do work and to be productive and to connect with people. It's the habit of when we're bored where we reach to it out of just
it's like the
routine.
new anxious smoking, we've
It
got nothing to
is.
do. You go to an airport, I always blows my mind. I'm sitting in the airport, I look around and we use our phones and we don't just use them in a normal way. There's a particular behavioral pose we have where we bend our necks, like right down, like penguins. You just bend that neck down and you can see like hundreds of people in this mode. Like no one's sitting, no one's looking around, no one's engaging in conversation anymore. We're very much any downtime we would have had before is distraction time now. Yeah,
one of the things we talk about in this book coming up are the 10 things or more that I do every single morning to jumpstart my brain. This idea where if you want to win the day, you have to win that first hour of the day. But one of the habits that most people engage with is actually decreasing their productivity and their performance and peace of mind is they're reaching for their phone. And I know this is hitting a nerve for some people that are listening to this right now, but as your brain coach, I want to call you on what could really serve you and what's not serving you. And when you wake up, you're in this very relaxed state, in these alpha, theta brainwave states where you're very suggestible. But if the first thing you do in the morning is grab for your phone, what you're doing is you're rewiring your brain for two things. Number one, you're rewiring your brain to be distracted. Again, every like, share, comment, cat video, whatever it is, it's going along the motivation, learning centers of your nervous system, and it's building your distraction. Whatever you're doing repeatedly, you're getting good at. So you're teaching yourself to be distracted. But the other thing it's doing, it's rewiring your brain to be reactive, meaning that the quality of our life comes down to really the quality of our agency, where we could proactively impose like what, our thoughts and our ideas into the world. But if you're picking up your phone the first thing, and all of a sudden you get text messages and emails and social media messages or a voicemail or something, you could get one message that could hijack your whole day. And now you're in defense, and now you're reacting to everything. You're fighting fires as opposed to starting your day with true intention, a day based on design. Technology is wonderful. It's just using it with intent, with specific applications, not out of boredom or out of pure habit.
Well, I know you're going to get into some of the practical solutions for, how to combat maybe some of the sort of digital overwhelm. But that's the external technology. Let's learn a little bit more about our own internal technology, the brain.